Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross podcast. My name is Alissa Golob and I'm here once again with my co-host Scott Hayward. How's it going, Scott?
It's going great, Alyssa. How are things with you?
I am pretending to be super happy because I'm severely sleep deprived. But other than that, pretty good.
Well, that's what you get with 2 under 2, right?
That's exactly. And my brother was here visiting from Ontario for the past week, so every day was action-packed. We actually took this, one of the busiest days, we took this gondola in Banff up to Sunshine Meadows, I believe it's called. It's like the ski resort, ski hill there. But you take this gondola up and then you can take the ski lift up even higher to the highest peak. But I had my 3-month-old with me, so I had him in the sling, so I wasn't able to go on the second ski lift all the way up. And so I just decided to walk a little bit. So I saw these hikers in front of me, so I started to walk with him. And then I got to the first viewpoint, and it was a really nice lake and some mountains. And then I saw the sign, and I'm like, oh, there's a second one. So I went up to the second one, and there were less people there, but I thought it was even better views. And then I noticed that there was a third lookout point. So I kept going to each lookout point, just kind of walking along, and realized that I had reached the end, and I actually had walked all the way up to where they took the second ski lift to the highest point of the mountain. Oh, heck no. I was just sort of leisurely like waiting for them, not even knowing. And it was really funny, the comments I was getting along the way. People were like, oh, your son's going to be a mountain man when he's older. And
that's like your husband's worst nightmare.
He would have just absolutely hated it and would have jumped off the mountain if I had made him do that. So, but it was great exercise, and it was so beautiful. Like, just when I thought I sort of had seen everything in Banff and you couldn't really show me anything different, there's always more, and it's always awe-inspiring. So I just love Alberta.
Well, if we head out there next summer, then that's something that you can take us to, because both my wife and I love to hike. And we'll earn our supper at the Grizzly House.
Absolutely. Yes, I did not feel bad about drinking beer that night. So
good, that's great. Well, that's a way better update than I had. It's far more interesting. My update was that we went to the Winona Peach Festival just down the street, because we're surrounded by peach country here in Eastern Canada and in Niagara. Of course, people in BC would beg to differ, and in many ways, rightfully so. But they have a big peach festival here where it's peach themed everything. And we were in a giant line for probably well over a half hour where people were making fun of us because we were standing in line to get peach sundaes, which were totally worth it. So we bought a bunch of peaches, and we've had some company over in the past week, and everything's peach themed. We have peach bourbon cocktails. We have grilled peaches and ice cream with brown bourbon butter on it, peach salsa with our pork. So it's been Peach Week here at the Hayward household, but it's all coming to an end because as of recording this, we're in September already. Time flies when you're having fun.
3 weeks exactly from today is the first day of fall. I looked it up this morning. So
I was gonna say, up in the mountains, was it feeling pretty cool already?
No, it was pretty hot this past week, all in the 30s, so it wasn't bad at all.
That's great.
Well, we actually got up at 4 a.m. to go to Moraine Lake, and of course got there too late. Parking lot already full.
Really?
So frustrating. Yeah, it was annoying. Because that's the one big downer.
I've gone up at 4 in the morning, Calgary, to go to Moraine Lake, and usually I'm okay, but you know, if I were 15 or 20 minutes later, I got up at like quarter after 4 or 4:30, and you're done.
I know, it's a bummer.
Yeah.
Today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think LaRosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Okay, so this week we're going to do our Right Now origin story part 2. We finished off a few weeks ago talking about how Right Now was created, kind of the personal and professional events that led up to our organization being created. So we got from 2016 when we first started up until 2018. A lot had happened during that time. So today we're going to finish from 2018 to present day 2022. Hopefully we can squeeze it all in. We only have about 45 minutes. It's going to be a shorter one, but hopefully we can do that for you guys. You can kind of see the evolution of our organization and what we're up to present day.
I actually wore the same shirt that I did for part 1, just so we have that continuity.
Or sure, that's why.
Just wore it every day for a month.
All right. So I think the last time when we left off, we were talking about the Alberta provincial election, which is very timely given what's going on right now. No pun intended. But so after the provincial election, which was in, oh man, I should have fact checked
No,
this before.
no, no, no. We're before that. We just finished the 2017. Now we're going into 2018.
Well, I did talk about Michaela Glasgow. I talked about coming out to Alberta and working on the nominations, and so I was leading up to the provincial election.
Yeah, leading up to that.
Yeah.
Because in 2018 we also had the federal nominations because we did so well in the leadership race, and we had a bunch of people that wanted to run. People were already starting to get sick of Trudeau back then, even in 2018, even those 3 years after he had won that election. But a big thing we worked toward in 2018 that we were quite successful with was the federal conservative convention in Halifax.
Right. Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, because we got our policies to the floor. We got a lot of our people to Halifax, which was a huge mammoth task.
Yes.
We made sure, like, the amount of time and energy we spent in that convention, I don't think has ever been done before, because you and I went to the convention basically when we first started Right Now in the spring. I believe it was the spring of 2016 in Vancouver.
Yep.
And we just saw kind of like how much of a disaster it was, and like how ill prepared the pro-life movement was for any discussion there. And so we wanted to make it different, and we brought a bunch of groups on board. Like, We Need a Law, and there's Saskatchewan Pro-Life Association. There are a few other groups that we brought on board as well. We all worked together as a team. We made sure that we had our slates.
Okay, let's just sort of break this down a little bit, because I think it's really important. So for those of you who don't know, each political party has different conventions. For the Conservative Party, it's every 4 years. Is that right?
2.
3 to 4 years?
Every
two
most
years.
parties it's 2. Yeah.
Okay, so every 2 years. And basically, each riding association elects a slate of delegates. So I believe there's 10. Scott, just interrupt me if I'm saying some of these
You're
facts
good.
wrong.
You're good.
Okay, so each riding association has 10 delegates that they send, and those delegates can then vote on different policies that the EDAs had previously voted on to get to the convention floor. So it's usually like the top 100 policies that are voted on by all the EDAs across the country, and each riding get to the actual convention floor. So there's a lot of work even before the convention even starts to get our policies to the floor. So we have to make sure that people go and get elected as an EDA, as a delegate at their EDA level. We have to make sure that our policies make it to the top 100 policies. So we have to make sure that pro-lifers are voting, and those smaller to vote up those policies.
And this is a really important point. So the EDAs, when they vote on these policies and where are going to be the top 100 to actually go to convention, or 70 or whatever the cutoff is to be discussed at convention, it's the EDA board of directors, which is why it's so important for pro-lifers to be on the board of directors, because sometimes what happens is an EDA board of directors doesn't vote for a pro-life policy. In fact, they can vote against it. And in one case in Peterborough, that EDA for the 2021 convention voted in favor of a pro-abortion policy, yet the entire slate of 10 delegates is pro-life, because the vast majority of the members of the party in that riding association are pro-life. But this is the disconnect between the board and the members, which is why it's important going forward that pro-lifers actually sit on their EDA board of directors federally and provincially, so we can actually get our stuff to convention.
So as a member of Calgary Rocky Ridge, I can put my name forward to become a delegate to the convention. Then party members vote. I'm not on the board of directors currently because they haven't had their AGM yet. So I could not have voted to get our policies to the convention floor. But then anyone who's on our list that does sit on the board of directors, we have to encourage them to vote for our specific policies. So once we have all our delegates elected across the country, and then once we have all our policies, as many as we can, passed to actually make it to convention, then we actually have to get there. So it's at different provinces, different cities each time. So we've been to one in Vancouver, we've been to one in Ottawa, and then Halifax. Next year it's in Quebec. Is it next year?
It's supposed to be in 2023, but
okay.
we'll see. The next one's going to be in Quebec City.
Yeah, so the next one's in Quebec City. So then our people actually have to get there. So it does cost money for flights and hotel and convention fees and everything. So we have to make sure that everybody's set for that. Sometimes the EDAs help out, sometimes they don't. So then everybody has to get to convention. And then once you're at convention, you have these breakout sessions. And these breakout sessions are basically have to do with each policy. So there could be one on social issues and on the economy, on different, uh,
Genres.
issues,
Yeah.
genres, if you will.
So they'll basically take the 100 policies, they'll split it out 33 in this one, 33 in that one, 33 in that one, and these breakout rooms, because it's an actual physical room, they will have discussions on these policies simultaneously. And then the top 10 policies that get voted to go through from each room then go to what's called the plenary floor, which happens the next day, the second last day, where every member, every delegate, who is present at the convention, which is like 2,000 or 3,000 people, get to vote on the final 30 policies.
Yeah. So if you have, like, say we pass 20 pro-life policies and they all go to the convention floor to the breakout session, and only the top 10 can actually make it to the main floor to get voted on to actually be passed as policy, then we actually have to vote down the weaker pro-life policies so that the most strong pro-life policies make it to the actual convention floor, to the plenary session. So some people don't understand that. Like, I think people, when we were in those breakout sessions, were looking around for, like, maybe it was a conscience rights or something like that, and we're voting it down, and people are wondering, why the heck are you doing that? Well, it's because we had stronger policies that were better worded, that were more all-encompassing, that we actually wanted to get passed to hopefully make it into the official party policy handbook,
or more winnable, right? So
yeah, or more winnable.
Yeah, because you would hate to have a policy that makes the party more pro-life not make it to the plenary floor because some other policy that would also make the party more pro-life, but maybe wasn't as tenable to the 2,000 or 3,000 people that are going to be there at the plenary floor the next day.
Right.
Fail as well, so that the party stays in the same place. So you have to be very intelligent this way, and this is something that that had never been done, frankly, at a federal convention before. A lot of people who were there, once it was explained to them, picked it up right away. I mean, we had to make sure with all the delegates that they were in our database so that we could text them, and we would text them live. So remember, we had 4 or 5 people who had access to our Nation Builder database that would text them live from a whole separate room. So that people will know, okay, we're voting for this policy, we're voting for that policy, and we're going to vote against this policy and vote down that policy. And they had to know that in real time because it might change given the dynamics in the room where things were going. So it was a huge operation that we had.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
From start to finish, it was huge. And yeah, like you said, this had never been done before. And our main push was to try and remove a section from the party policy handbook that says that the conservative government will not pass legislation to regulate abortion. And so a conservative government means strictly the cabinet. It does not mean backbenchers or the whole caucus. And it's oftentimes the one policy that leaders and other politicians point to as a justification or an excuse as to why they voted against a pro-life bill. Or, when Andrew Scheer, a self-proclaimed pro-life leader, says we won't reopen the abortion debate, it's because this policy is in the party policy handbook. So it'd be difficult for a leader or cabinet to vote against a party policy. Of course, it happens all the time, but it's not a good look. So we just wanted to get rid of that policy completely, so that it was a blank slate. People could have free votes. They wouldn't have to point to that to justify their bad votes on these issues. And so that was our main one. We had plenty of others, but that was a big one that we wanted to eliminate. And it was kind of the talk of the convention. There was a lot of media wondering if that was going to happen. I personally did multiple interviews with a lot of mainstream media. I know Scott did as well. And like Scott said, it was also the first time that we came together with a bunch of other pro-life organizations, all specifically for that exact same purpose. So they were also working together to get delegates to work with us to have that list, so we could text our people to get them in those breakout rooms to vote for specific policies that we wanted. We had our own separate room.
Yep, our war room.
our war room that we could like meet there and kind of figure out what we were going to do. So
Remember, I think it was you and Tabitha and someone else. Like once certain policies made it out of the room into the convention floor, it was you.
I was getting to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to steal your thunder, but I just love this. It was you had designed them, I believe, and then I think it was you and Tabitha and someone else went to the print shop, got like 1,000 of these little pamphlets printed about why they should vote for this pro-life policy. I think it was just to eliminate that pro-abortion policy in the policy declaration statement, and then you guys had handed them out. We had Josh go out, and because we knew, so when you want for the Conservative Party of Canada, if you want to delete or amend or add a policy or a part of the Constitution, because there's a whole separate section just for the party Constitution that basically goes through the exact same process, and they're basically mirrored together, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a plenary session just on Constitution, and then you have a plenary session on the policy. In order to amend, delete, or add both to the Constitution and to the party policy document within the Conservative Party of Canada, you need what's called a double majority at that final vote on the plenary session when all 2,000 or 3,000 delegates get to vote. What that means is that you first need a majority of everyone in the room. Mm-hmm. You need 50% plus one, and then you need a majority from all the provinces and territories. So maybe you have a majority of everyone, and you have BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba voting for you, as well as Ontario. You have 5, but you have the other 8 provinces and territories not vote with you, despite you had that first majority. Then it fails because you don't have that second majority. Right. So we made sure that we would get delegates. First off, that we had a majority of delegates, and then secondly, we got delegates from smaller places like PEI, right? They only have 4 ridings, so you only need 21 pro-lifers from PEI, and then you have that province, Newfoundland, Labrador, places like that. Alberta was a question, and I remember you gave Josh a bunch of these, and he went to specific, because people from the ridings, they'll tend to sit together at these things, and he went to a couple of tables where there was some EDAs, some riding delegates from Calgary, and they're all sitting together because we didn't know where the delegates from Calgary were, and he was able to bring a bunch on board, and so we won. I'm pretty sure we would have won Alberta. Anyway, I just think that's so cool. Everything was so efficient and so quick and so fast that had never happened before. And I've been to lots of conventions myself. I've never seen pro-lifers or the gun right people or anyone like that be that organized at a convention before.
So the minute that our Delete 52 policy made it past the breakout session, we then scrambled up to the war room where we were all located. We got the wording down right. We figured out, we made the little pamphlets like Scott said. We got them printed within like a few hours. And then before people were heading into the plenary session to vote on these policies, we were handing them out. We were talking to people. We were sort of lobbying, because that's the only time that you can really do that, because you won't know if it was going to pass the breakout session or not. So once it did, it was all hands on deck. And then once you actually get into the plenary room, there are usually different rules regarding when a policy is brought up. So for Delete 52, this policy that we wanted, you could have 2 speakers at the for, like, yay mic, and 2 speakers against. So at the no mic, and that was the rules. And so and then that's another thing. We already had speakers lined up for the yay mic. And we trained them on the talking.
Trained them on the talking points. We had females of color, people who can speak French, female members of parliament, female senators, and candidates who are running either for nominations or candidates who are won their nominations in these Target 50 ridings that we were targeting for that upcoming election campaign. And we made sure we got them to the front. We had another friend of ours from Saskatchewan who kind of physically bulldozed his way through to make sure that these women can get to the mic, and that he didn't have the crazy old guy go on and on and on like I am right now. It was a lot of work.
The tension was palpable. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll tell you the result after this, so stay tuned.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larosmedia.com.
And be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
And we're back. So it was very tense when this policy was brought forward. It was very loud in the room. We had amazing yay speakers that Scott just described, and they had horrible nay speakers, like just the worst people on the mic that just had really terrible talking points, barely sounded conservative. The room was not buying it. I really felt like this was a turning point in the debate. I thought if they had just stuck to the 2 yays and the 2 no's, that we would have won. But lo and behold, Lisa Raitt, the MP and former cabinet minister, asked if she could be a third speaker on the no side. And so the chair made an exception and said, you know what, because this is such a controversial topic, we're actually going to allow a third speaker. And so she got up to the mic and she sounded calm and reasonable and made a pitch as to why we shouldn't delete this policy, this abortion policy. And then that was it. So then they voted.
Well, there was a nay speaker as well. Like a speaker in favor of the motion as well. They added one more for each, to be fair.
We didn't need another one though.
No,
we were good.
Yeah.
So then we voted, and you will remember the results better than I, but it was so close.
A 52-48 split in terms of percentage. So the total raw votes that separated it was 107 votes. So if we had 108 extra pro-life delegates to the convention, that's one extra pro-life delegate for every 3 ridings out there. That's one extra pro-life delegate for every 30 delegates there. We would have won that vote. I think we won it on the second majority. I think we had a majority of the provinces and territories. I'm quite confident on that. We just failed on that first majority. Every other pro-life policy we had there, which there were like close to 10 others, we got passed with flying colors, no problem.
Yeah. And that was a huge disappointment. It would have been amazing to do this all on the first try. But there's no doubt in my mind that this is the beginning of the end for that policy. Even with COVID, I think that we can still manage to pull it off in the future. Maybe not this particular convention, but in the very near future, just because COVID was a little bit of a setback. But that was an extremely exciting and invigorating process. Just the amount of organization and attention to detail that it took, not only from our organization but working with the other ones, was incredible. And despite that slight loss, we still were able to pass multiple pro-life policies at that convention, which just made the party even more pro-life and our issue even stronger, which was a positive thing as well.
Yeah, we got more people pro-lifers on national council, so it went from basically like 1 to about 4-ish. It's like Halifax is also a fun city, right? I had a blast. I think you had a blast. We hosted what's called a hospitality suite, and we made sure that our hospitality suite was basically the very first one when you walk down the hall of the convention center that people would go into. So basically a hospitality suite is you have a bunch of music, you have a bunch of food, and you have a bunch of drink that's free for the delegates that are at the convention. So we had all these politicians, all these delegates, whether they're pro-life or not, come into our hospitality suite, which we called the life of the party. It was a lot of fun. And in that way, when they came to our suite first, they hadn't been to like 5 other suites ahead. So they're not like, 7 beers deep. Like you can have actual conversations. And then by the time the night goes on and it's like kind of 9 o'clock or whatever, our suite's kind of dying, we can kind of shut it down and go then to the other suites and do our necessary shaking of hands and networking. So that to me was one of my favorite moments. So many of the candidates that we had not met in person yet across the country that we were helping with their nominations. They were there, so we got to meet them. They eventually became members of parliament. Many of them are members of parliament today. It was worth every money, every cent that we invested into that convention and into that hospitality suite. It was absolutely worth it. It was a lot of fun.
Huge return of investment.
Oh yeah. Massive.
Yeah, so, and we had an oyster bar, just to shout out, because we were in Halifax, so I thought that was pretty cool, too. I hate oysters. I thought it was disgusting, but I thought for that particular convention, it was pretty cool, and people seemed to enjoy it, so that was good, too. Okay, so then after convention, we're still in 2018. Things sort of slowed down a little bit. We are working on nominations because there is an election in 2019. Is there anything worthy of the end of the year at 2018 that you can think of?
Oh, let me see. What was happening in 2018? We were working hard on nominations. We had already done our fundraising tour, so now we actually could draw a salary and whatnot. Yeah, like there was no provincial election in Alberta yet, although you were starting to work on those nominations as well. There was at that time the provincial election in Ontario. Leading into so the Doug Ford had won the leadership in early 2018, and then in June of 2018 there was an election. Now the election in Ontario wasn't as fun as the provincial election in Alberta or the federal elections in 2019 and 2021, and the reason for that is because most of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario candidates in that provincial election were either appointed or won their nominations when Patrick Brown was leader of the party. So most of them are lame. Most of that caucus is lame. So we didn't really get to participate. I mean, we talked about that in part 1, which of course you should go watch. That's a big reason why Alissa left Ontario to go live in Alberta, because we can actually participate freely in those nominations. So even though like by all rights, there should have been way more pro-lifers elected in 2018, and then of course subsequently this past year in 2022, we did actually increase the number of pro-lifers in the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in that June of 2018 election. One of my favorite stats is that there were more pro-life MPPs, more pro-life members of provincial parliament in Queen's Park in the Legislative Assembly of Ontario after that election than there were Liberal MPPs. It was the first time the Liberals had gone that low. They lost official party status. It was quite the change election in Ontario in 2018.
Right. Yeah, it was nuts. So yeah, and then I'm also working on nominations in Alberta during this time. We really focused on as many nominations as possible, just because it was a new party. It was a clean slate. Everybody, there were a lot of candidates running, so we had a lot of selection. So we helped over 52 nomination candidates in different capacities. Some, there were like 20 volunteers working regularly. Some we had less. Some we sold memberships for. It was to varying degrees, but we did have that many running, and the majority of them did get elected in that provincial election. So because of that, they did also start a pro-life caucus provincially in the UCP, which was also very positive, which led to various bills and speeches, like we had mentioned last time, Michaela Glasgow's speech against Motion 501.
506.
Oh, 506. Yeah, I'm like, what number was it? And then Dan Williams's conscience rights bill. So those were all positive developments. Adriana LaGrange, who was the president of the Red Deer Pro-Life Association and was involved in the pro-life movement for over 20 years, was elected appointed the education minister by Jason Kenney, which was also very positive. Casey Madju was in the cabinet, who is a strong Christian pro-life social conservative from Edmonton. So there was a lot of positive developments. There were some setbacks during that election, which I won't get into right now. But overall, it was very positive, and they did elect a fairly good caucus. It definitely can be better, but at the time it was pretty good.
Yeah, so then I think in Christmas in 2018, we took a breather. It was a really big year, very successful year. And then we started to, and this is what we started to do kind of going forward, is look at the year ahead and kind of plan almost to the day right? Because in 2019, we knew exactly when the provincial election was going to be. In Alberta, that is. In 2019, we knew exactly when the federal election was going to be, so you can do what's called backward scheduling. You say, okay, however many days before election we want to have this accomplished, and how many days before that we want to have that accomplished. And so you move all the way back to January, 3rd or 4th or whatever it is when we got back from Christmas vacation. A lot of it was finishing up the federal nominations and provincial nominations. But once we won those nominations, which we had been doing in 2018 and going to 2019, a really big push that we started doing in the spring of 2019 after the provincial election in Alberta, and we can get back to the provincial election in Alberta, was doing our tour. If you remember, you did BC and Alberta, I did a lot of the other parts of the country where we were doing our target seats, is encouraging pro-lifers to come out and knock on doors for pro-lifers who had won their nominations, because it's one thing to win a nomination, but you also have to win the riding. We need them in the House of Commons. We need them in the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, what have you. We actually need to get them elected. So why don't you talk about Alberta a little bit in that provincial election, and then we can switch over federally, because
I think I covered it mostly what I just said, but I do want to talk a bit about this federal campaign. So in the new year of 2019, we launched our 50 for Life campaign. So basically, we took the top 50 swing ridings across the country where the candidates lost by the fewest number of votes, and we focused on those ridings to not only win nominations for pro-lifers, and once those nominations were won, to then get as many door knockers as humanly possible out to door knock, because door knocking makes all the difference in an election. It increases the voter turnout rate by a significant number, and the more votes you identify, the more voters you get to the polls, the greater the chance that swing candidate can win. And so I'll just talk about my end. I did focus in Alberta, and specifically though in British Columbia. Now we had the most, besides Ontario, we had the most amount of swing ridings in British Columbia. Mm-hmm. We had 10. And we had very strong candidates, some of the strongest social conservatives in caucus who did end up winning were from British Columbia. So I actually drove there from Calgary on multiple occasions. I think it was like three times in a month and a half. It was really pretty regularly. I did a couple tours, one of which was I was counter-protested at every single event that I went to. There were these groups of abortion activists in BC who got a hold of our schedule, was following us really closely on social media, and whether it be at a public library or a community center, they were out there before every talk. And then kudos to the libraries in BC, because some of the libraries in the past have canceled our events or refused to hold them, but despite the fact that they were being protested by pretty gross signs out front, they did not tell me that my talk was canceled, and they knew that there was free speech and that I had rented the room and that I was free to utilize it in the way that I had intended. So that was really positive as well. And just one interesting side note about British Columbia is that we had 10 pro-life candidates in the top 10 swing ridings in the province. And I knew each of them personally. I had met with them, had drinks, dinner, meetings, lots of different things, had gotten out as many volunteers as possible. Our goal was at least 20 volunteers for each of the candidates in those ridings. And some of them did create media attention. And so in one particular instance, there was an article in like a Catholic publication that I had done an event at a church, and two of the candidates had come and they were interviewed as well. So it wasn't a secret that this article is being published, because they were also interviewed. But a few weeks after that had come out, one of the candidates had called me up and said, Alissa, I don't want to deal with this media attention. I don't want to be specifically known as a pro-life candidate. And so I'm just going to ask that you not help me anymore. And that, I'll just do my own thing. You focus on the other ridings, and we'll just kind of friendly part our ways. So whatever, I can't force someone to receive my help. So I did that, and we moved some of those volunteers from his riding into other ridings where the candidates were more accepting. And just fast forward to when the election actually happened, we won every single one of those ridings except for that one riding where the guy no longer wanted our help.
He lost that riding by 150 votes, and we took his volunteers from that riding, and we transfer them to the riding next to him. And then the pro-life female candidate in that riding where we transferred those volunteers to, she won her riding by 150 votes.
Yeah.
So
if anyone's listening to this that potentially wants to be a candidate, some words of wisdom: don't say that you want our help and have us do all this stuff for you and then take it back, because you don't want to deal with, being confronted with some of these issues, because you're going to be confronted with them no matter what. So it's better you do it sooner rather than later, because it could cost you your seat and your potential political career.
This was probably the first time, though, I would say I was kind of disappointed in the response of the pro-life movement, because in the spring of 2019, we were starting to do these presentations to encourage people to come out and knock on doors for very strong pro-life candidates in their area in very winnable seats. We could talk about the results from the election in a little bit, but I will say that every single pro-lifer that we got elected to the House of Commons, they had all 20 door knockers in every single one of those ridings. Now, some of the ridings did have 20 door knockers for those pro-life candidates that were targeting for those Target 50 seats that didn't win. But every single pro-life candidate that did not win did not have 20 door knockers, except for the 2 or 3 that did. So that was a huge disappointment to me, because surely in a riding that has on average 100,000 people in it, 20 pro-lifers can go knock on doors once a week for a 6-week campaign. And if pro-lifers aren't willing to do that, then you're going to lose. And if you're wondering why, there are no changes to abortion laws in this country, and you're the one who didn't go out and knock on doors, then go ahead and look in the mirror, because there's the problem staring right back to you.
Yeah, it's always really frustrating when we have supporters and we highlight something positive a pro-life politician said or did or something like that. And then pro-lifers respond like, well, what is he actually doing? They're not actually doing anything in the House of Commons or in the provincial legislature. And it's like, well, they have to have a majority. They have to have a caucus. They can't just go out by themselves and pass a law. Like, you need to have that majority in the House of Commons. And the way that we get that majority is by nominating and electing pro-life candidates, which is what our organization does. And the way that we do that is to have pro-life supporters get involved in nominations and actually knock on doors during elections. Like, it's not rocket science. And so if you actually want pro-lifers, especially in these legislatures, to actually do something, then you have to be the first person to do something so that they can actually work together and accomplish and get the job done by passing laws.
Yeah, it's not like you can introduce a bill at a provincial or federal legislature whenever you want. Basically, in any country, this just isn't Canada.
Yeah.
Like, there's if you're not a minister of the Crown, which the vast majority of politicians who are elected are not ministers of the Crown, then you have to introduce what's called a private member's bill. And usually, what happens to the private member's bill is your name literally gets thrown into a lottery. And federally, at least in the House of Commons, they draw names for every 30. So they'll have a tranche of 30. Then you get to introduce your piece of legislation if you're part of that 30. And then the amount of time that's allocated to private members' business is much, much smaller than the amount of time that's allocated to government business, which of course makes sense. Like, to the victor goes the spoils, so to speak. Like, they were elected by the people to implement an agenda, so they would get the majority of the time in the legislature. So it's a lot of work. And so what Alyssa's saying is absolutely true. Like, unless you have a pro-life majority where you have pro-life members in the cabinet that can introduce actual government-backed pro-life legislation, it is quite difficult. And so the fact that Kathy Wagenthal had 2 pieces of pro-life legislation in her political career go to a vote is actually quite rare and extremely impressive feat on her part. So anyway, it all starts with pro-lifers. Like, if you're not going to get off your ass to go knock on doors, once every 2 years, once a week, for 3 hours at a time for a 6-week campaign, then don't get mad at us. Don't get mad at pro-life politicians. Get mad at yourself, because you're the problem.
Now, I will say, though, that a lot of the times in the past that pro-life organizations have asked pro-lifers to do specific events and campaigns. And oftentimes they don't really see the results of that, whether it's because they aren't tracking the results, or organizations think it's better to do something than nothing. Maybe it's to put a flag on the lawn, or maybe it's to hold up a sign on the street, or whatever the case may be. And oftentimes people think, well, it's better to do something than nothing. Even if we, influence one person, it's not a waste. And there is some element of truth to that, but our organization wants to do what's the most effective and the best use of your time and money. And so if we ask you to do something, whether it be to become a delegate for a convention or to vote for a specific policy or to vote in a nomination or to door knock for a specific candidate, we will show you the results of that. And it all goes to a greater goal of passing pro-life legislation. And we aren't just saying, oh, here's a pro-life candidate, go help this person. They're completely unwinnable, unelectable, but they're pro-life, so go do that. Because we don't want to waste your time. We want to make sure that we are those swing votes, those swing volunteers, that we can actually get those people, those politicians elected. And so we can track, if we ask you to do something, we can specifically tell you why we want you to do that, what the result of that is, because we know how we can track how many doors somebody can knock on in an hour. We can tell you how that specifically affected that particular by-election or election, and it all goes towards the greater purpose, because our goal, of course, is to elect 171 pro-life politicians. So we have a numerical value on specifically what we need to do, and we're not just going to ask you to do something for the sake of doing it. We're not that type of organization. So I can understand the hesitancy of some pro-lifers, because that's what they're used to in the pro-life movement, but that's not what our organization does. And as Scott always likes to say, he wants to have a sign over his office that says conjecture-free zone. We don't just guess that something works, we know that something works, and that's why we ask you to do it.
I've trained you so well. You use all my talking points, everything like that. This is actually a good segue, because at the end of the convention in August of 2018 for the Federal Conservative Party of Canada, there was that big announcement from Maxime Bernier that he was going to go start his own political party, the PPC, the People's Party of Canada, which really was more or less a nothing burger up until the election in 2019 and leading into it. And we were starting to come up against this a little bit, because some people were starting to get disappointed in the talking points that were beginning to come from Andrew Scheer and his office from that May of 2019 onward. Of course, after Andrew Scheer, you think, well, things can't get worse. Well, we'll get to that. But anyway, so that we were coming against that a little bit. And this is a very, very important point. So we will never recommend to someone to vote for a pro-abortion candidate if there is a pro-life candidate. We always recommend to our supporters that you vote for the most winnable pro-life candidate in your riding. So in your riding, that pro-life candidate might be from this small fringe party that might get 2%, but hey, that's your most winnable pro-life candidate, then that's who we recommend for you to vote for. We don't recommend, that being said, that you go invest your time with a candidate who's polling at 2, 3, 4%. So if you live in a riding where you have a Christian Heritage Party candidate that's your most winnable pro-life candidate, fantastic. Mark that person down in your ballot. Don't door knock for that person. Get in your car, drive 15, 20, 30 minutes to a riding or two next to you where there is let's say a pro-life Conservative Party of candidate that's in a dogfight to win that election, because those extra 50 voters that are going to vote for that pro-life Conservative candidate that you find is going to make a much larger difference for that Conservative candidate who's polling at 35% neck and neck with, her NDP or Liberal counterpart, as opposed to the CHP candidate in your riding that's polling at 2, 3, 4%. So in terms of asking pro-lifers to put their time in an efficient way, where we always track what's called ROI, return on investment. We're very, very, very focused on that. So this was basically the whole premise of our door knocking pitch presentations that we did, and I think we did well over 50 of them. This is where Faitine Grisecki from We Need a Law from For My Canada came in, and she helped quite a bit. She even started doing some of these presentations. I remember at one point, I was on the train and I went and did a presentation all the way in Quebec City that was translated directly into French down into Montreal. And then later that night, I did a live CTV interview in downtown Toronto. And then I kept going down to London or something for another presentation. Oh, down to Windsor, pardon me. That's where it was, for another presentation. And then took the train back up to Ottawa. This was all within 36 hours. And meantime, on the train, you're working, helping out candidates as best as you can with the Wi-Fi. That's when I decided to start taking the train where I live down here in Southern Ontario, because I'm not driving. I can take a nap if I need to, but more importantly, I'm not driving so I can work simultaneously while traveling in between where I need to go. It was a lot of travel we put into there.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one time I had left Ottawa, drove on my birthday, mind you. This is what I did on my birthday. I left Ottawa in my vehicle where, much to Alyssa's happiness, the AC no longer worked, so it wasn't freezing. It was super, super hot because in the middle of July, I drove all the way out to Uxbridge, slept like maybe 4 hours there, then drove from Uxbridge all the way out to, it was either Halifax or St. John. It was St. John because that's where we had some, we had 3 pro-life candidates that actually won their seat down there. So I'm glad that I did it. But like the amount of time that we put into this to get this message out to people, to pro-lifers, because frankly, pro-lifers have never heard this message before. You know, when they did come out, it did pay off. But like I said earlier, it was kind of disappointing because when they didn't come out to our presentations, or they did hear it and they didn't sign up and they didn't door knock, well, then it resulted in some failures.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the results of the 2019 federal election and what happened after. We'll be right back.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
And we're back. So, I mean, we know the results of the 2019 federal election. The Conservatives did not win a majority government or government at all in that election. However, we were able to demote Justin Trudeau to a minority government, and we did increase the number of pro-life politicians in the House of Commons. So those were 2 definitely big wins, and that was all done with a leader who was well-known social conservative who was attacked on his pro-life stance basically everywhere he went. So that is an important fact to know going into what happened afterwards, and that is with the next leadership race and the rise of Leslyn Lewis. So basically, a lot of the Conservative Party members weren't satisfied with the election results, and so Andrew Scheer stepped down. He did not he respected what the members were saying, and so there was a new leadership race. And so the big dogs in this race were Erin O'Toole, who was a former cabinet minister, and Peter MacKay, who was the co-founder of the Conservative Party and also a well-known conservative as well, also a well-known red Tory. And of course, he is infamous for saying that the pro-life issue was the stinking albatross around Andrew Scheer's neck during that election, hence why our podcast is called The Stinking Albatross. But there were also 2 other candidates, and one of them was Derek Sloan, who was a pro-life backbencher in the Conservative Party, and also Leslyn Lewis. And of course, we all know who Leslyn was then, but Scott and I had actually door-knocked for Leslyn in the 2015 federal election when she filled in at the very last minute for a candidate for a riding in Scarborough. And so we had actually met her, door-knocked with her, and she had remembered us, so she actually called us and told us that she was interested in running for the party. So that was really interesting because we hadn't heard from her for quite a while, and we knew that she was a strong social conservative, but we just, I think at that point, didn't realize exactly how good she would actually be.
Yeah, actually, I'm quite disappointed in myself. I know I've written about this in the past, but after the whole, so I there's one thing I have to take issue with you. I don't think the members of the party wanted Andrew Scheer to resign. I think it was a lot of the professional conservative class who didn't like Andrew Scheer to begin with because he wasn't supposed to win. It was supposed to be like Maxime Bernier or Erin O'Toole or someone like that. And the pro-lifers, social conservatives, got him to one who had put either Brad Trost or Pierre Lemieux first. And so they had it in for him. He had all but 8 members, and so he increased the number of Conservatives elected to the House of Commons. Under Stephen Harper, they dipped below 100. Andrew got them above 120. Actually, under Andrew Scheer, the Conservative Party of Canada has had its highest number of people ever to vote for it in the history of the country. That was under Andrew Scheer. The highest growth ever since 2011, so almost 10 years earlier. And despite all this, of course, the professional class wanted to go because he, I would say, at the end of the campaign and then post-campaign, really found his gumption to say, yeah, you know what? I am pro-life. What about it? Basically, do you want to fight about it, Justin Trudeau? And then they didn't. They never talked about it ever again. Like once he said that, they're like, oh, well, he has, you know, for lack of a better term, he has balls, so like we don't want to fight him on this, which is something we see with Leslyn Lewis time and time again. Anyway, I felt pretty down about it because Andrew Scheer came to speak to the UCP AGM in Calgary in November of 2019, and you and I were in the room, and there was like 1,000 people in the room, and some people we know that never liked Andrew because they had, you know, sour milk over him beating Maxime Bernier because they were on Bernier's campaign for the leadership race. They staged a walk out of his speech, and there was like 1,000 people in the room, and like 12 people walked out. I thought they were all using the washroom together. I don't know.
The political assassin, right?
Yeah. But anyway, so he was well received by party members there. They cheered in multiple times in the speech. He had a few just natural standing ovations. Sometimes it's manufactured, like we've seen Patrick Brown do that before. It was nothing like that, but he had resigned in December, and we felt pretty deflated because we were getting ready to go fight that convention, what was supposed to be in April 2020.
Yes.
So when Leslyn had called me, we had worked so hard in 2019 that we basically took the entire month of December off. And I was back home just before Christmas at the gym on the elliptical. I see Leslyn Lewis call me, and I was like, you know what, I just can't. And so I just let it go to voicemail, and I didn't get back to it until mid-January when she told me that she was running. So there was a whole month there where I did basically nothing, and I kicked myself every single day because she had a campaign manager who was terrible. And that's when we got a hold of our friend Steve Outhouse to say, like, Steve, would you be interested in helping out Leslyn? And he said, well, you know, I said to my wife I wouldn't get involved anymore and that kind of stuff or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, just want to have a conversation with her. And he said, fine. And so, like, then he delayed by like a month, and then a month later he did, and he called me right away, and he's like, she's amazing. Where did you find her? Blah, blah, blah. I'm all in. Like, his, there was a bunch of other candidates, I think, that wanted Steve. He said yes to Leslyn. He said yes to Leslyn, and her campaign took off like wildfire after that. I'm not saying it's just because of Steve, but Steve allowed her to be herself. Under Steve, she finally started doing these, interviews and whatnot, and it completely changed that leadership race. But of course, we had COVID come into that as well.
Yeah. So I think this is a good spot to leave off. We have to go to a part 3, obviously. I thought we could do it in 2 parts, but we just can't. We ran out of time. But the third part will be fascinating, even more interesting than the first 2. I can promise you that. But yeah, we'll leave it at the cliffhanger with Leslyn Lewis, her first time around, because a lot of things happened and that are affecting present day. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for watching. Follow our channel, like us on Facebook at RightNow HQ. Follow us on Twitter at RightNow HQ. Please make sure to subscribe to us so you can get notified when a new episode comes out, which is every Friday. You can subscribe on YouTube, on Rumble, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, basically wherever you listen to podcasts. So make sure you do that. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye for now.